States wrote the security protocols that became the foundation of SE Linux that are in Linux today. So if you think about from a Cold War perspective, how ironic. The Russian military is using this as the most secure operating system because the American security agencies wrote the security protocols that are in Linux. It shows the power of the model and the power of sharing. That's one of myriad examples that I can walk through. But fundamentally, by sharing, by opening up, the information itself becomes more valuable, even if any single institution can't fully tap that value. So to some extent, by giving it away, we've made it dramatically more valuable. The good news is that's not it, right? That's a high level. The economics of abundance drive the fundamental economics of why open source works so well. But it goes beyond the economics of abundance. The second innovation associated with open source was a fundamentally better software development model. And what I mean by that, in the simple terms, I know many of you are technical, is as one of the classic original programmers in Linux said, with enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. It has been proven in study after study after study, independent academic studies, not paid for industry studies, but independent academic studies, that open source has by far less than half the bugs per 1,000 lines of code as does proprietary software. And the simple reason is more people involved, more people participating, and fundamentally much more modularity in the system. Right? So if you can imagine, as software gets bigger, the ability for a single group to manage and actually run that software gets harder and harder and harder. And the cathedral style, very much a managed process to develop software, has fallen apart. And you can start to see this in applications, not to beat up on competitors, but Vista. Vista, there are academics who believe, has reached the limit of what a fully planned out, top-down, starting in one person's mind and working its way out can do in the size of a piece of software. You get limited somewhere in the 20 million lines of code range, and it's hard to go much beyond that. Linux is fascinating. It is developed, and I'm using Linux as an example. This goes across many categories. It's developed so rapidly because it's modularized into several thousand components, with people who've never met each other writing these various components. It comes together in a modular form and ultimately leads to much better software. The New York Stock Exchange is running Red Hat Linux and has never crashed and has never had a scalability problem. It leads to better software, developed much faster and much more cheaply, and continues to iterate more quickly. So it's fundamentally a better way to develop software. But the final, and that's actually what's on this page, I'll finally get to it, the final interesting thing about open source is, as a way to meet customer needs, is a fundamentally different and superior way to meet customer needs. Basically, in open source, customers are involved in writing the solution, right? When we develop functionality, we don't guess what the customer wants. We don't go out and do research on what the customer wants and go back and try to write it. We write it with our customers, right? I'll use an example. We recently released something called MRG, Messaging Real-Time and Grid. It's a component that sits on top of the operating system. The messaging layer, it's AMQP. It's a very, very high-speed messaging layer. Now, we've had amazing adoption, and our customers are really excited with it. And here's why. Basically, a couple of years ago, JP Morgan came to us and said, look, we need a high-speed but very commoditized messaging layer because there are only 2 people doing high-speed messaging, and it's very expensive, proprietary, it's hard to move around, it's not standardized, et cetera, et cetera. We've taken a stab at it. Can you take this and take it to the next level? So we take the code, we create something called AMQP.org. We put that code out, okay, on a website. We ask banks, we ask our competitors, we ask hardware players, we ask anybody we think of who might be interested in a messaging layer to join. And over the course of 2 years, we've developed, we meaning the community, not us, our customers with us, an extraordinarily powerful high-speed messaging layer that is completely commoditized, that Cisco is natively building into its routers because it's a part of it, that Microsoft, a competitor, is part of the group, as we've asked them to join. And by the time we deliver that product, All of our customers have had a chance to modify, provide input, provide code. So anywhere from participate to comment to actually contribute. Our customers have been involved. So by the time it comes out, it's like a glove that fits perfectly because we've had the hand. We've had our customers involved at every step in the process to develop that. Now that's the good news. I have to say, from Red Hat's perspective, the bad news is the same day we released it, so did one of our competitors. Why? Because the code's out there and available, right? That's okay. That's part of the model. We've accepted that. Therefore, obviously, our pricing is dramatically lower than it would be if we fully controlled the code. But that's okay. The code's better. And so by sharing, again, as a company, we may not be able to lock up that functionality and extract abnormal rents associated with it. But by sharing, we've been able to make it a fundamentally better, more accepted component. And over the long run, as the leaders in open source, we'll figure out how to work with our customers to monetize that. I think a great example outside of software of this, how many people here are familiar with American Idol? Right? Okay, a few are willing to admit they know what American Idol is. I'm sure more of you actually know. All right, yeah, American Idol is a show. It's been quite a sensation in the United States. It's being copied in many places beyond now, where basically you start off with a bunch of aspiring artists, and every week people are voted on, off. And by the end, you have a winner at the end of a season that's been voted on by, it's like 40 million Americans, I think, last year voted on this massive number of people. Guess what? For the last couple of years when this has happened, the album released by that artist has been an instant hit, and the tour is instantly sold out. Now, why? Well, it makes sense, right? The people are going to buy the album, were involved in voting on who the person they liked was, and this year they're even going to write the song that the artist is going to perform. So when you think about creating a star, I mean, if you go back a few years ago, you know, Britney Spears, right? That was something that a group of studio executives thought people would want to see. So the record label said, I think this is the right person. Let's put it out there and see. Sometimes they were right, sometimes they were wrong. Britney Spears, they were right. I'm sure there are 4 or 5 people we've never even heard of that they invested millions in and they were wrong. The whole American Idol gig is completely different, right? They know they're right. By the time that comes out, everybody got to vote to participate and they know they're right. We feel that way when we release our products. It's not a matter of, are we right? Is this what our customers wanted? By the time we release a piece of software, we know it's what our customers want because our customers helped write it, helped participate in it, and helped develop it. So a fundamentally more powerful production model. Now, that's step one, but if that were the only thing about open source, we wouldn't be standing here today. And what I mean by that is open source as a development model is clearly superior, we believe, to proprietary, and we've study after study after study. But most companies aren't just interested in good functionality, right? Companies are interested in business outcomes, right? And good software doesn't lead to business outcomes, right? So we've had to develop a business model that works on top of open source that is a fundamentally more pro-customer business model. And let me talk a little bit about what we do. Again, not as a sales pitch, but I think it's important to understand what we do as a company in order to talk about why it's a more customer-friendly business model. You know, I get asked a lot, well, how does Red Hat balance shareholder value with being true to open source? And I always come back and say that's not a problem because we're never in conflict because we don't sell functionality, right? Selling something that's free is hard, right? I came from the airline industry. I'm used to doing something hard. Right? You can't sell free. And I was talking to some customers about it. It's even harder to buy something that's free, right? So we don't sell functionality. That's not what we do as a company. Open source develops extraordinary functionality that's free. What we do is we create enterprise-class software that can be consumed by an enterprise, right? So we take this extraordinarily powerful development model that is open source and we build world-class, bulletproof software, right? So basically works like this. Once every couple of years, I'll use Linux as the example, but we play in multiple layers in the stack, but we take the bits, 4,000 projects that make up Linux, and once every